So I don't have any slides today, which is unusual for a scientist, because I wanted to talk directly to all of you. I want to mirror, first of all, Jen's comments at the beginning. And I think we'll have time to talk about this at the end of the day, because I'll be one of those people on the last session. Um, on the point that um, for the first time in my professional lifetime, it really is true that the entire populace feels what we all feel every day. And normally that is restricted to the 5% of the so or the population who have themselves or a family member with a relatively immediately life-threatening or disabling illness. And the other 95% go about their day as if those struggles are irrelevant to them. And then we see this all the time, that the day after they or one of their family members are diagnosed with one of these diseases, their lives viewpoint changes 180 degrees, and they become advocates and zealots, and with this sense of urgency and focus that we've seen in COVID-19. So the question is, for all of us, is how do we instantiate that urgency in our fellow citizens going forward? And we'll talk about that, I think, at the end of the day. But I wanted to give you a sense of some of the things that we've done at NCATs in COVID-19 that addresses what the possibilities are. I mean, it's easy to say, well, gosh, everything's different during COVID-19, but what do I mean? What have we actually done? And rather than showing you slides and a bunch of data and things that might not be immediately accessible, there are a bunch of web links that I've sent to Jamie and EveryLife folks, and they will, oh, look at all those! Oh my heavens, they're all there. So as I mentioned these, if you're interested, you can go to them. First of all, I have said what I just said to you in my most recent director's message. It's my blog, essentially. It's at the bottom for this just last month. The overall NCATS response to COVID is, in the first one, our lives at NCATS really dramatically changed in March, as it did for all of you. NCATS is the home of rare diseases at the NIH, as I think all of you know. But we, the approaches, the expertise, the tools, the technologies, the people that we have are deployable in all kinds of disease settings. And so we pivoted a very large amount of our effort toward COVID. Our labs were closed for months, so we were unable to do any work on anything except COVID. And what has come out of that pivot, I think, is directly applicable to rare diseases. The first one is a portal for drug screening. Many of us have been working on drug screening and repurposing for a long time. But the problem here is that people don't share their data. They don't share their positive data. They don't share their negative data. They don't tell you the details of the assays that they use, so it's impossible to reproduce them or interpret them. If you're going to try to model this with AI or machine learning kinds of approaches, you can't do it. And so we created this portal into which we put all of our COVID-19 related drug screening data. This is our collection of drugs, every drug that's ever been approved for human use worldwide in the 4 major markets, and made all of that data available essentially immediately after we generated it. And even for us, that was the first time. We'd never actually made those data immediately and completely available, but we did now. and you can go there and browse the data by the compounds or the assay or the target or what have you. We've done the same thing on the opposite end of the spectrum. Another thing that would not have been possible given objections from our collaborators, and I should say that the Open Data Portal, we work with a lot of collaborators worldwide on these kinds of drug screens, and so we need their permission to make the data available, and that's never been forthcoming until now. Because of that urgency that I mentioned. On the N3C side, we've been able to put together an absolutely extraordinary data collection from now, well, when we're completed, it will be about 80 of the most of the large academic health centers across the country who have contributed electronic health record data to a secure, privacy-protected enclave that is where the data are all harmonized, and so you're comparing apples and apples. And the numbers here are extraordinary. We currently are about halfway through and have almost 3 million patients in this collection, over 300,000 of which have COVID. And many of us have been wanting to do this for decades, and it wasn't technically possible to begin with. It has been technically possible for a while, but we couldn't get over the oh gosh, I don't want to share issue. Everybody overnight got over this, and they proactively wrote me wanting to share their data. So when this is complete, we'll have. We think if trends bear out, we'll have about 6 million people in this database, about 700,000 of whom have COVID. Now, just imagine if we had that for every rare disease. The questions that you can ask are absolutely extraordinary in terms of what kind of symptoms and signs people have, what kinds of treatments they're getting in real-world health settings, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So again, something that was never possible before is possible now. I want to skip down to ACTIV. ACTIV stands for Accelerating COVID-19 Therapeutic Interventions and Vaccines. It's an example of trans-NIH collaboration, which, believe it or not, does not always happen. That all the 27 institutes have their own prerogatives, and they sometimes get a little cranky if you want to try to have them work together. That all evaporated. Same thing with companies, that they started working together in ways that I haven't seen since the HIV epidemic. And then public and private working together. That's what ACTIV is. It's a public-private partnership among federal agencies and about 20 pharmaceutical companies. And out of that has come a bunch of coordinated adaptive master protocol trials, which are more efficient ways to do trials after a centralized or an agreed to prioritization process for what drugs are most promising that ought to go into clinical trials in what order. So across companies, across NIH institutes, and we're running one of those here at NCATs. It happens to be on immunomodulators for the cytokine storm that causes COVID. We're also running a number of large trials on convalescent plasma, because you might have heard that controversy in the literature as well. And we're able to do things in the clinical trial space that, again, I've wanted to do for years that are now possible. On the rare disease side, we've done two things, only one of which is on here. Jen gave us a really a good tour through all of the ways that COVID-19 has affected rare disease patients, and we knew that when all of this was over, and one day, yes, my fellow citizens and others, this will be over one day, and when it is, we want to have data. In this business and in public policies, individual stories are really compelling, but you need data. And so we went out through the Rare Disease Clinical Research Network and did still doing an ongoing survey of the rare disease community. And if you haven't taken it yet, please go to that link and take the survey, because we're trying to gather input from many different. We currently have about 500 different disorders in there. There's about 4,000 patients and families have put their data in there. And we plan to use this as, well, shall I say, a battering ram for change when this is all over. But we really need your data, so please contribute to it. The other thing we've done, relevant to one of Jen's questions, is we've been working on the serology question. What does that mean? That means, there are two kinds of tests for COVID. One is the so-called PCR test. It's a genetic test. Do you have the virus now? Another was an antibody test. Did you have the infection in the past, whether you remember it or not, or whether you had symptoms or not? And so we started doing very early on also a very large serology survey across about 10,000 people all over the country. And thanks to funding from the National Cancer Institute, actually, we've been able to expand this to to folks from the Rare Disease Survey to get a sense of what their antibody responses have been as well. So what's the lesson of all this? It's that when people, and this was a bit of a surprise to me, I must say, when people realize that their lives or the lives of their family members are in immediate or virtually immediately danger, they know what to do. Even scientists know what to do. That is, I didn't have to go out and ask them to do these things, to work together, to collaborate, to share data, to share expertise, to work together on a team to get something done. They proactively do it. They knew in their heart of hearts that this was the right thing to do, but they hadn't done it. But when this came up, they did it. So the question that all of us, I think, really need to ask ourselves in our community is, this has been a terrible moment for our country and the world. Let's make no mistake about it. But this is also a singular moment, I think, for the rare disease community, and we can't let it go to waste. So we'll be able to talk about this, I think, toward the end of the day. And thanks to Emil and the rest of the team for having me.